Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeart Radio Network, the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. You good old boys from in Canada, I want to say thank you. We love you very much. And Big C, I'm telling you, there's no one I love more than them good old boys down south in the land of the free, the home of the brave. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys?
Well, Charlton, where else can you find people who toss catfish on the ice at a hockey rink? Other than good old Southern boys, Nashville Predators. United Stanley Cup playoff against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah.
The Predators, Charlton, have not lost 2 games in a row here during this Stanley Cup run, so it's time for them to even up this series on the road against Pittsburgh and take that home ice advantage when they get ready to go back to Nashville in a couple days.
Well, that's funny that them good old boys down south leave it to the south to spoil the reputation of Lord Stanley Cup, the aristocrat. And I'm telling you, they're good old boys. They thought they were doing Southern hospitality by giving their neighbors some fish, Big C. But the boys up north, they don't like fish unless it's cooked. Okay, it's called a misdemeanor. You guys got to teach them some hockey etiquette, Big C. What's going on with you good old boys, Big C?
Well, they thought they like sushi on the East Coast. Some raw catfish, and somebody would slice it up with some slim leg or something and roll it over to some rice. But, they got it all wrong. They thought rice. They thought it was ice, but it was rice.
So not only are we dealing with cultural shock, but semantics also. Today is a beautiful May 31st, 2017. I want to say thank you for following Big C Sports on the iHeart Radio Network. And I'm sure it was just all innocent, Big C. I'm sure the good old boys that brought the fish to the game. Back down south, I hear a lot of people say bring your own food, Out here in California, there's something called BYOB, which is bring your own beer. But when they say bring your own fish, they had no idea it was a crime to give your neighbors food, Big C. That's what I'm disappointed. But they said this gentleman was charged with 3 misdemeanors in connection to the incident of throwing a fish onto the hockey rink. Now, the good old boys out in San Francisco that were fighting and throwing punches and actually hurting each other, there's no misdemeanor. So it seems like there's a little bit of corruption in our justice system. Why is giving someone free fish a crime, but punching somebody in the face 3 times not a misdemeanor? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, ironically, they ended up dropping the charge. I think it might have been Julio Jones.
Yeah.
I think that's where that catfish is.
Yeah.
Before the football season, he was down there fishing on a bass boat looking for catfish, and so I think that was him. But they had thrown that fish out on the ice, and when they found out the police department they were Julio,
yeah,
went on and dropped the charges, for a couple of autographs on the football.
That is so funny. So obviously, sometimes I even heard the great Nick Saban. Nick Saban's a multi-millionaire, and I heard him on a program saying oftentimes when he goes on a recruiting trip, he just wants to get down to business. And some of these good old boys, because it might be a cultural shock, okay? When they offer him something to eat, he says, no, I already ate dinner. He just wants to get their kids signed to a contract. I'm sure he's not used to catfish and collard greens and cornbread. Is that what I hear, Big C? Your thoughts?
Yeah. He did come from up north at one point, so, he's from Bowling Green originally.
That's funny. That's funny, Big C. Oh, that is so funny. Anyway, I'm glad that everything works out. All's well in love and war and catfish. The catfish we eat usually is deep fried. I hear it's better baked, but I've never eaten it served raw, Big C. So hopefully they'll turn that over. Also in the world of sports, a beautiful day for everything in the United States. It's been a little rainy in some parts of the country, but other parts, like out here in the Bay Area, it rained last night. But now it's nice and about 75 to 80 degrees in some places. I just want to bring up a thought. Bryce Harper coming out here to the West Coast and batting in the same ballpark where Barry Bonds, set the record for hitting home runs, passing Hank Aaron at AT&T Park, Big C. Just to hear the talk of Harper being worth $400 million, I'm wondering in what universe, number one, And who in the world can justify, what has he done to even talk about $200 million? Barry Bonds never hit those numbers financially, but hit a lot more home runs than Harper will ever hit. Big C, your thoughts? Not that I recall, Big C. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to Google it as fast as I can, but I don't see where they won anything, Big C. Your thoughts?
I was thinking he might have won a couple World Series. And MVPs and home run titles, they're going to get that type of money.
No home run titles either. No.
I guess a great hairdo will get you paid nowadays.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a great hairdo or a mop. Some of them good old boys could use some barbers. I know they got barber shops back on the East Coast, Big C. Maybe we'll hook them up with some of the good old boys. But we talk about Trout when he broke his finger, and Trout wasn't even in the fight. Trout was playing for Anaheim, was not in a fight at all, slid into second base, and he's going to be out for a couple of games, Big C. And these good old boys throwing punches, they're still talking about it. It really wasn't a fight. No one really got hit. No one got knocked out. No one really got hurt. It's just this charge in the mound thing. Maybe these good old boys are watching hockey, and hockey gets to do it all the time. Maybe they're trying to put some ice out there in the baseball bats and have them do the same type of behavior. But I think, Manfred, what do you think would be the appropriate thing to crack down? I think find them 2 or 3 games, maybe some money, Big C. But as far as the big suspension, that's part of baseball. Your thoughts?
Harper got a 4-game suspension, Pitcher got a 6-game suspension. They both appealed those on the first day, so they're eligible to play.
Yeah.
The league will most likely reduce each one of those suspensions by 1 game.
Yeah.
And allow the players to stay in the lineup. Now, it's not going to hurt the Giants more because this is a relief pitcher who only is going to go every couple of days.
Yeah.
Harper's an everyday player.
Yeah.
So, it could really hurt the Nats if they're in the race late in the year.
Oh, yeah.
And they come up a game or 2 short, and they've lost a couple games that, Harper's out. So, cooler heads are going to have to prevail when you look at what could particularly happen in a baseball fight. This is like basketball. These are 2 sports that players are unprotected.
Yeah.
They're totally exposed. And so, and in baseball, as well as in basketball, your hand is your living, Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Holding the bat. You can't hold the bat with a broken hand, Charles.
No, not well anyway.
Basketball,
yeah.
With a broken hand. That's Kareem. Kareem, lost half a season one year when he punched Kermit Washington in the face. I mean, not Kermit Washington, Kent Benson.
Yeah.
He lost half a season one year when he broke his hand punching the guy. So these athletes need to be a little more tactical. But I think the greatest thing, and we talked about it, is that baseball has to adapt the NBA rules.
Yeah.
You come out onto the playing field, you automatically get a game suspension, if not a 2-game suspension.
Yeah.
That will cut down these fights completely, Charlton. I mean, players don't want to be out there toe-to-toe. They really don't.
Oh, no, not at all.
They hope that their benches can get out there in a hurry.
Yeah.
They always expect it. They're not sitting out there to look to scrap. They're looking for backup in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah. None of them want to get hurt. But I do want to say today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. So hopefully the baseball gods, they'll realize that no matter what people say, okay, people love to stop and see the train wreck. People love to stop and see somebody charging the mound. Obviously, if you look at San Francisco, they've had sellout crowds for a long time. But when you look up in the stands, a lot of people are no showing because they're struggling this year and they're not going to be anywhere near chasing a playoff spot unless they can turn things around. Right now, out of 5 teams in the West, they're in second to last place, 22-31. Only ahead of San Diego, Big C. So obviously, if you're Washington, you have a lot more to gain because you're 31-19 on the season, and this is a team that should at least compete for the NL title, Big C. So we'll have to see how that goes. I need someone to tell me how Bryce Harper, when they talk about $400 million, tell me one thing he's done that could put him on a higher pay scale. I know history is not the same as the current players, but in Barry Bonds' ballpark, every time Barry Bonds came to the plate, it was must-see TV. People put down what they were doing to watch Barry Bonds swing the bat. Not only was Barry the most walk player, but he hit more home runs than anybody in one season, Big C. So I know seeing that up close, how dominant he was. Now, I can't tell you, seeing Bryce Harper up close a couple of times here in the Bay Area, he doesn't strike me as the same type of must-see TV. So is it just TV trying to sell this guy? Because we've seen in the Bay Area Mark McGwire, we've seen Jose Canseco, we've seen back in the day Reggie Jackson, we've seen obviously Barry Bonds, a lot of great players. Willie Mays. We've seen the best players in baseball here in the Bay Area. To hear a guy that doesn't strike fear in the heart of anybody to talk about $400 million, where's it going to come from, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Jonathan, television revenue is what's paying the players. The advertising dollar. It's not the fans in the seat, because you watch baseball in another month when most of these stadiums will be 75% empty.
Yeah.
On any particular game.
Yeah.
But to pay somebody $400 million, it's almost like a slap in the face to the fans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To say that this guy is making $400 million, and so when you go out there on a night, Charlton, and he's 0 for 4, how are the fans supposed to feel? You're paying him $400 million, he's 0 for 4 tonight.
Yeah.
Shouldn't I get some money back for my ticket?
Something.
If you pay a player that kind of money, Charlton, there should be a guarantee sold for the fans.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the league's going to have to start looking at. And I'm not knocking the players for what they make nowadays, Charlton. Get your money while you can.
Yeah.
But there should be some type of exit clause where if players don't perform, then fans receive a percentage back on the ticket. And I'm talking about every fan in the stadium, whether you're a show or no show.
Yeah.
Okay? But Bryce Harper's making $400 million and can't bat 400.
No, he can't.
Problem. Last year he batted like 270, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So when you're batting 270, how do you, leapfrog up to $400 million? You can't even tie a guy up long enough to make it worth that.
Yeah.
I remember all of the backlash years ago when A-Rod signed a contract for $225 million with the Rangers.
Yeah.
And all the talk, this was a 10-year deal that he had signed. All the talk about, how do you justify paying a player that kind of money?
Yeah.
And even still today's market, it's a lot of money, Charlton. But, you spoke about 3 players in the Bay Area that were all in the 600-plus home run club.
Yeah.
Mark McGwire, Willie Mays, Barry Bonds. These players in their careers hit over 600 home runs. At one time, Mays was the home run leader.
Yeah.
Until past, in the National League.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth had hit more home runs than him, and Aaron passed it.
Yeah.
And then we look at Mark McGwire, who had batted over 600 home runs with the A's and the Cardinals. And Barry Bonds, an all-time home run king. And I don't care about somebody saying juice. There's not been a clean athlete, Jonathan, in the past 20 years, 25 years in pro sports, period.
Yeah.
It's just a matter who they want to pass the piss test. That's
Yeah.
all it is. That's what it
That's
comes down to. You turn a blind eye, when you know that the guy's going to fail a test.
Yeah.
It's like anything else. You look at a polygraph. A polygraph test, depending on who's taking it, you pass or fail. Okay?
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
giving the test? It's not about its exact science. It's whatever grade gauge they want to put you on.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And that's the same thing with a drug test with professional athletes. I always ask this question. And telling players, you fail with an illegal substance. But we can give you Vicodin, we can give you codeine, we can give you Oxycontin, we can give you any type of drug that comes in a pill form.
Yeah.
And you can pass a drug test. So how is that?
Yeah.
How is that, Jonathan?
That's funny, Big C. And speaking of that, I talked to a DA one time, knowing some people in law enforcement, and an attorney told me whenever you take a polygraph test, they already know whether you pass or fail. If they're out to get you, you fail no matter what the answer is. Just so you good old boys know, always get your lawyer and never take a polygraph test. That's not legal advice. That's just coming from smart people. They already got it figured out. If you say left, they're going to say no, the answer is right. If you say right, they're going to say nope, the answer is left, and that's put a lot of people behind bars, Big C. I just want to get back on to Nationals Bryce Harper, because I think about AT&T Park, which was called Pac-Bell Park at one time. It was built private money for $350 million. For the beautiful ballpark, I think the most beautiful location in the country for any ballpark, right there on McCovey Cove on the San Francisco Bay. You can see downtown, you can see the Oakland East Bay Hills. It's such a gorgeous place. You can see the ships out in the bay, the yachts, the boats. You can see everything. You can see some of those guys. I think that catfish tossed back in Pittsburgh came from the Bay, Big C. That's what my markings were from that fish that was caught in the bay. They sent it back east. But just to hear a guy that can make more money than Barry Bonds, than Mark McGwire, Reggie Jackson, combined, Big C, it doesn't make any sense. He's only batting .331 with 15 home runs and 41 RBIs. I want to see that guy biting 600 when you start talking about that kind of money, Big C. Does that make any sense, Big C?
He has to have high batting percentage. He needs to bat over 400. You think about the greatest hitters of of all time. You think about people like, Pete Rose. Pete Rose is also, all the times that he laid the bat on the ball.
Yeah.
Ichiro, who was still hitting it. These guys that were lifetime hitters. Gentlemen of leisure with the bat. They just enjoyed playing the game.
Yeah.
You think about somebody like Ricky Henderson, how valuable was he?
Oh, amazing.
1,100 bases in his career.
Yeah.
You get on, he would manufacture runs. We talk about the great hitters throughout time. I mean, you think about the year that Big Papi had last year.
Oh, yeah.
Boston.
Yeah.
A phenomenal year for a 40-year-old.
Yeah.
And Bryce Harper's numbers are nowhere near what
Nowhere near.
were last year.
Nowhere near.
If that's the case, why didn't Big Papi just come back and say, hey, if you're going to play Bryce Harper, pay me?
Maybe they should tell Big Papi that they're paying $400 million for a guy that only bats 330, Big C. That's what they should tell Big Papi. I just think...
when you look at Mike Trout's numbers before he got hurt, Charles,
yeah.
He was number one in all but one statistical category. That was home runs. He was second.
Yeah.
But he was number one in every statistical category in the major leagues.
Yeah.
Now you think about that. So if you're paying Bryce Harper that type of money, what is Mike Trout worth?
Yeah.
If you're number one in every category except for home runs, where you're number two.
Yeah.
How much is that worth? So, Mike Trout has to get a payday if Bryce Harper gets paid.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can not pay Mike Trout. Mike can say, I'm going to stay home.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. In fact, when you
give me that type of money, I'm going to stay home.
It's just
how well you do as an organization.
I agree with you, Big C. And looking at the NL leaders, when you talk about RBIs, you have Blackman out of Colorado, 46. Duvall for Cincinnati has 45. Reynolds out of Colorado has 44. And Lamb out of Arizona has 43 RBIs. I think we told you that good old boy only has 42 or 41. If you look at the American League, Cruz out of Seattle, he has 42. Sono out of Minnesota has 39. Garcia out of Chicago has 37 RBIs. And Trout out of Los Angeles has 36. But I think a much better hitter in Trout, Big C. So obviously, you're right. If the agent can get you that kind of money, and if you're Bryce Harper, he has to know he's not worth that kind of money. And no matter who he is, whenever someone comes to San Francisco, I'm always comparing them to Barry Bonds when he's in the batter's box. I'm looking at the great Willie Mays. I'm looking at the great Mark McGwire, and even Jose Canseco, the Bash brothers, whether they did it with the juice or not. Those guys make you put down what you were doing to come to the TV. I don't see Harper having that. And plus, he only threw one good punch out of 5. He threw one good punch and missed 4, Big C, and that's not worth $400 million in my opinion, Big C. I want to also just touch on something that I think it still strikes a nerve. It goes back to Tiger Woods, and a lot of the TV and radio pundits, they were saying, yeah, it was a DUI. I'm not making excuses for driving around when you're impaired. But the rush to judgment on this African-American golfer, not even having the facts, there's so many people that have called him a drunkard and that he shouldn't have been drinking and driving. And what's he doing out at 3 o'clock in the morning as if he has a curfew? And now that it's come out again that there's no alcohol in his system, I'm sure none of those knuckleheads will apologize. But something that irks me even more as an African-American, looking at some of the media pundits, they keep saying, Tiger's life spiraled out of control when he was caught cheating on his wife, as if no other person in the history of the world has ever done that. From presidents to CEOs and all the guys that visit Las Vegas in the hotels, I'm sure they're not black golfers. They have a lot of guys that go to Vegas and support one of their top economies, but it's not black golfers. And for still people to act like Tiger's the only man to have an infidelity against his spouse, I just think that's also kind of playing the race card, because the fact of the matter is, the golfing world is about 99% Caucasian. I'm sure Tiger does the same thing that his Caucasian brethren do, but they don't get called out on it, Big C. And I know the fact because I've been around golf courses and sports for about 30-something years. I just hate the fact that they label everything that's happened to him based on the day that his wife broke out the windshield of his car. Could you imagine if the black guy was chasing down a white lady and broke out her windshield? He would have been arrested. Your thoughts?
Well, the synopsis of his life is spiraled out of control, Charlton. I don't know that you can say that the man's life is spiraled out of control.
No, not at all.
What spiraled out of control was the economics that he created for everybody else.
Yeah.
That's what spiraled out of control, and it still bothers people.
Yeah.
When Tiger put an economic hurt on the golf industry and broadcast industry, that's what bothers people more than anything else. So,
yeah.
When you see a golf tournament on television, there's no heightened of excitement.
No.
You're not rooting in to see who's going to make what shot.
No.
Tiger was followed on every hole and every shot during his career.
Yeah.
And that's what they lack now, is that they have no draw appeal. is a lackluster now because Tiger's not there. They try to hype a dead event.
Yeah.
You know, it's like going to the Kentucky Derby and they're running quarter horses that you know can't finish.
Yeah.
And that's what you have now in a golf tournament.
Yeah.
It's like, it's who's who. It's like, who the hell is out there? That's the who's who.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's nobody dominated. I mean, Sergio Garcia, who won the Masters.
Yeah.
You know, for the first time in his career, you know, after 15 years or so.
Yeah.
You know, he hasn't done anything in the tournament since.
No.
I think if Tiger had performed at that level, that he had won the Masters and the next 5 tournaments, he didn't show up place.
Yeah.
You know, couldn't make the cut in 2 of them.
Yeah.
You know, but nobody's saying Sergio, you know, is in a spiral after winning the Masters and haven't done anything. Jordan Spieth hasn't won anything in the past couple of years of Spieth. And so, as you said, it is a racial divide, even in that. And to speak even more on the racial divide, when you look at Tiger, you know, you look at LeBron. LeBron owns a house down in Los Angeles, Charles.
Yeah.
The house was spray painted with racist dialogue on the gate.
Donald Trump mentality.
In
Yeah.
California, your neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, and so the police are investigating it as a hate crime. I don't care whether you're a Warriors fan, Lakers fan, Clippers fan, whatever. You don't have the right to go and destroy this man's property.
No.
Now you think about it. If it was a rich white millionaire, how would it be treated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how you got to look at it. Now LeBron is a rich man, and you know, but it goes to show in America, just like with Tiger, regardless of how wealthy you are as a black man, you're still a black man.
Yeah.
And that's how you're treated. It doesn't make any difference how much money you have. It was proven several years ago with Tiger.
Yeah.
And even still today, how people talk about him in a negative light.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell me that there's no white people out there getting drunk with DUIs, no white athletes?
Oh, I know many of them. I know many of them, Big C. I know many of them that have told, and I've seen them drinking and driving. And sometimes, I'm not saying anybody's innocent or guilty of anything, but I know good old boys that have been pulled over and been let go because they tell me. And there was a couple times I was even in the car with some of them, and I'm not saying we should have been doing it, but I know they were drinking and driving, and they got let go. They just happened to be Caucasian. They got let go by law enforcement. I'm not saying anyone should do that, but someone I have a lot of respect for. I just want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. You need athletic insurance. Go through Big C Sports on the iHeart Radio network. We go through Ben and Mark. They've been around over 50 years, and we're in all 50 states and in several countries around the world. Tweet out the Big C Sports on the iHeart Radio network. One of the good old boys at the Masters that kind of said some negative things about Tiger, the chairman down there, don't have much respect for, and Billy Payne. But guess who I have a lot of respect for, Big C? The great Jack Nicklaus, who's a white guy, who has had every benefit that a white man could be offered in the world of sports, especially in golf. Here's Jack Nicklaus saying that Tiger Woods is my friend. I'm concerned about Tiger Woods. He's not lambasting this guy all over the media, not saying that something happened with his marriage, because Jack knows all the golfers that have girlfriends. Every single one of them, Jack knows, because Jack knows people. Jack doesn't shout him out on the radio. He doesn't shout him out on TV because he has too much class for that. But for every reporter that wants to say, well, Tiger Woods cheated on his wife, they don't know who his wife was cheating with, who she ran around with. She happened to marry a billionaire. I'm sure it was love at first sight. But she ran around that crowd, and we know the groupie crowd. I'm not saying, read that between the lines if you want to, because this is real talk. We know there are people who just hang around, some guys who are wealthy, hoping to land the paycheck. That's a fact. Whether you agree with it or not, we know that's the case. But I appreciate Jack for saying he's my friend. We've talked about it 100 times. I want to do what I can to help him get his life on track in the golf game, but he's no different than any other man that's had any type of infidelity and is going to work 9 to 5. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Justin, I'd like to think about when was the last time that the media talked about Josh Brown, the white beater, the former New York Giant kicker?
That lasted about 2 days.
He was a white beater, and I haven't heard anything about him in the press.
No.
No one talks about him, but they still talk negative of a Ray Rice, in the media.
Yeah.
And Ray Rice was in there several years ago. Josh Brown, went over for several years.
Yeah.
Constantly. We saw Ray Rice once, but nobody said anything negative about Josh Brown, even though Mara came out this week bashing Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
He didn't say anything negative about Josh Brown, who he paid to beat up his ex-wife on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But he's a man of high moral.
So why is it that our society is okay with you beating up your spouse, but if you have an affair, they'll talk about that? What that happened in 2012 or something like that, Big C?
Yeah.
2012, they seem like they're more offended that he cheated on a white woman, who knows what she was doing, than some white guy that beat the crap out of his wife 20 times. That's hardly ever held up as a message of what not to do anymore, Big C. Why is that the case? Your thoughts?
Well, it was easy to pick on the black guy because what you're going to say is that this is what we expected of him, okay?
Yeah.
Regardless of how much money these people always resort back to that. They say that without saying these people. So they take the one person and try to make a negative situation for everybody. It's okay, if we target in on Tiger Woods, then we can bypass the white guy who's doing this. Just Donald Trump talked about grabbing a woman in the crotch. There's nobody in the media that's talking about that.
So, and that's a good point. I want to bring this up. While you,
all those women that were suing him,
yeah,
those lawsuits went away.
Yeah.
Think about it. They just went away. Where'd the money come from? Who paid who? But when it's Bill Cosby, when they started jury selection on Bill Cosby,
yeah,
the same type of allegation that Donald Trump admitted that he did.
And Donald is on tape. Donald is on tape, Big C, bragging about it. But the black guy, Bill Cosby, is facing a jury trial. And ironically, there were some of the prosecutors saying they want to get as many black Americans off the jury as possible. Can you believe that garbage still going on today in 2017, Big C?
Welcome to racist America, Jonathan. It will never subside. What happens in America is that they show their face, they show their color in these incidents. And people say, no, it's not about race. Well, if you got a prosecutor saying that I don't want any black people on the jury because the black people will let him off, regardless, you got to present a strong enough case.
Yeah.
And see, the prosecutor plays the race card, not Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
The prosecutor. So how can black America ever get a fair trial when the prosecution is continuously playing the race card? And depending on what jurisdiction that you're in, you might only get a half a dozen to a dozen blacks in a jury pool of 200 people.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
What they do is they do this by zip code, Charles. It's not by chance when they pick juries.
Yeah.
They do it by zip code, so they know who reside in certain zip codes. So you send out the questionnaires in the zip codes, and so automatically you eliminated the majority. They don't go to inner city when they're pulling jury pools. They don't, Charles, not when there's blacks on trial.
Yeah.
They honestly don't. And when you talk about how injustice the American justice system is, when you talk about a jury of your peers,
yeah,
when was the last time that a black man had a jury of all blacks? Okay? It doesn't exist. Aren't those considered your peers?
Yeah.
So often that whites get juries of all whites. Okay?
Yeah.
If you got a trial in Beverly Hills and you're white, you're going to have an all-white jury.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
They're not going to have any blacks in there.
Well,
it's that simple.
They took Rodney King out of the downtown LA area and moved it way up to Simi Valley. So we know that race goes on, but we're not going to be dumb enough and pretend like it doesn't exist. And I think when there's so much this stuff with Tiger Woods, they keep going back to when his wife broke out the window and it's escalated. She was never prosecuted. Now, I challenge anyone right now, just walk out to any parking lot, take a golf club, and break out the window of somebody's car. And do it on TV, do it on tape. I guarantee you'll be prosecuted. That didn't happen to her, Big C. So, and that's just wrong, no matter who you are, man or woman. But that didn't happen to her. But he's still being put on trial for that by fiat, by a lot of people in media. So I just want to always speak against that. As a multi-billionaire, I don't know if he's a billionaire or worth $700 million, if he can't get justice by mainstream media, how's a guy making $50,000 a year going to get justice, Big C? Especially if you're African American. It's something I always say to the young black athletes because I work with a lot of schools. And a lot of this young talent, man, they get so much love from their coaches when they're big, strong, and black. They want them to come to their colleges so they can play for their universities, so they could be the next, Michael Jordan or the next Barry Bonds or the next Emmitt Smith or whoever they're going to be. And I always let these kids know you got to have your head on your shoulders, because once you take the uniform off, you're not going to get the same treatment. And that's, again, I see that read his ugly head with Tiger. Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's so prevalent, Jonathan, that athletes dominate the landscape of society. And if you can be productive for somebody and help them generate a lot of dollars, you're the best thing, since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with so many great African-American athletes, but the minute that they're injured, they're gone.
Yeah.
Everybody will turn their back on them in a heartbeat. It's like because the next man up, they can find another one that was just like him, maybe even faster.
Yeah.
Bigger, stronger. And so when you think about the African-American athlete, Jonathan, it's almost like a throwaway byproduct.
Yeah.
Because there's so many. And, we can manipulate the situation anytime we want from a university or a professional perspective.
Yeah.
It's like the professional sports. African Americans are constantly competing against each other for
Yeah.
particular positions.
Yeah.
Where Caucasians are singled out for certain positions and they're going to stay in those positions.
Yeah.
African Americans are constantly fighting against each other for employment. So it's not just in the mainstream street jumping when you're out there in society trying to get a job. It's also that way in sports. That you have to go in. If you're a wide receiver, you're competing generally against another African American wide receiver or running back if you're the same.
Yeah.
But if you're a quarterback, it's not an African American generally competing against a white quarterback. That's a rare institution, Johnson, when that happens.
Well, that's funny that you bring it up because I want to talk about something, and I'm not saying I'm not guilty of it too. Back in the day, I started out with the Reebok Combine and also Nike Combine. Something going on all over the country. Remember we were talking about Coach Harbaugh from Michigan, how he took an airplane down to Florida to recruit athletes because they can't call it an official recruiting trip. So instead of having one come to your university, take an airplane down to Florida and have these events where people show up. He also did it in California. There's a coach by the name of Bruce Rollison out of Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, one of the private schools down in Southern California. Very good, dominant high school football program as well as basketball program, won several national championships. Well, there's this thing called 7-on-7, and they're being sponsored by companies like Adidas and Nike and Reebok, and these schools, they invite the top athletes, Big C, for free. These are high school players. They don't get any money, but they get to show up to test their skills. So it's another chance for colleges to recruit these kids. Now, obviously, I'm for kids having an opportunity. But can you tell me what's the benefit of a young high school kid being flown across the country to participate in 7-on-7 drills? No compensation whatsoever, Big C, for them or their families. But I'm sure these coaches get money by getting kids to come to these camps. Can you tell me what's wrong about that, or do you agree with that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Chelsea, what this is called mass marketing. That's what it is. You bring all of it into one pool where you don't have to economically, as coaches, hit spot after spot. You bring all these players in. Now, the issue of these players coming in, where's the financing coming from?
Yeah.
Are these legal or illegal donations to non-professional
Yeah.
athletes?
Yeah.
This is how you have to look at it.
Yeah.
They're getting free gear from these shoe sponsors, Johnson. So, how do you look at that? Now, if you were a college athlete and you receive such benefits, you would be deemed illegal.
Yeah.
But when you look around, how many parents, and I know a lot can, but on average, when you take some of the better athletes whose parents don't have the financial well-being,
Yeah.
who's paying for their trips?
Yeah. Well,
To get to these facilities to work out.
Yeah.
You also are provided with housing and meals and all of that. Like I said, you're getting extra sports gear. But, when you look at this is an economic way for the colleges to bring everybody in.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's like a cattle roundup. Let's bring them in and let's call the best ones off, all right?
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. So this is a process where you bring them all into an arena. It's just like the combine. When you have the combine, you invite the top 400 people that you want to bring to the combine. You bring in 400 knowing you're only drafting 256.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the same thing with these scenarios. Okay, so we bring 300-400 kids into one of these camps at one places. We have 50, 60 universities looking at them. And a lot of kids come in with high hopes, Charles,
Yeah.
and find themselves at a junior college because they just didn't impress enough. So you have to also look at the mental anguish that a lot of these young men have to go through
Yeah.
when they don't make the cut.
Well, Big C, that's a very good point. So for all you parents, I know we talk about the professional sports and how Bryce Harper, $400 million, what a joke. And we talk about the colleges, how we want to make sure they also focus on academics. I still hope that we can find a way to compensate student athletes, but to realize that Adidas has been doing this since 2007, where they had what's called the National Championship for 7-on-7. There were some kids that were suspended out of St. Augustine High School in San Diego because they broke school rules to go to this camp. There's kids from IMG Academy out of Florida. It's happening all over the country. Ironically, about 8 out of 10 of these kids are young black athletes, Big C, that have a lot of talent, but sometimes they don't have the same economics at home, but they're given they don't even get paid to do these things. They're just to make more money. It's like a free recruiting tool for the universities. And I'm so anti that because I want them to do this, have these kids fly around the country to learn math and science, not how to bench press 400 pounds, or run the 40 and 4.3, or run the 100 in a 10.6, Big C, or a 10.4. That's not what it's for. And I know I'm not naive, but I would love to see making that effort for African Americans. It's just another form of black exploitation. I don't like it to see so many schools saying, yeah, we like that, because it gives them the chance to get schools, to get the top athletes to come to their private schools. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you talk about universities and exploitation, I would love for the NCAA to put out the graduation rate on universities. And if you have players who fail,
yeah,
who flunk, when you lose that scholarship, you don't get the chance to just replace that player, because that's what happens. And that's the one standard that the NCAA fails all the college athletes on.
Yeah.
Is that they do not force the universities to educate them. And I've always been a firm believer. If a player fails academically,
yeah,
the university loses that scholarship, because all they're going to do is kick that player off the team.
Yeah.
If he's not making the cut, they'll kick him off the team, give somebody else the scholarship.
Yeah.
I've always felt that the university should lose a scholarship. At that point, academics will become a priority with the football teams, other than just practicing an extra hour a day.
Yeah.
With the books an extra hour a day. And so the student athlete deserves more.
Yeah.
When you look at it and what they're getting. Yes, it's nice to get a nice pair of cleats or sneakers and a sweatsuit and a t-shirt and a baseball cap. That's really nice.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the piece of paper you want in your hand is the one that's rolled up when you're walking off the stage with the dean.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one you want.
That's the one you want.
That life-enduring one.
Yeah.
But that's not what any coach goes out and recruits a player and says. He's like, I can make your son a star.
Yeah.
He can really benefit our program. We have one of the best academic institutions in the country. Okay, but what's your player graduation rate?
Big C.
How many players started the season last year, and how many of them had a passing grade?
That's a very good point.
That's something the coaches never talk about, Dalton.
That's a very good point. Big C, in the final few minutes of our program today on this beautiful May the 31st, 2017, I want to get your thoughts. Tonight, the National Hockey League in the Stanley Cup Finals, we had Pittsburgh, the favorite, over Nashville. Hopefully they don't have that stinking fish. You're good up boys that brought a fish. I just thought that's funny. I had no idea it was a misdemeanor. You know how many times they throw fish up in Seattle, up on that, I think it's called Market Square? They throw fish all the time. No one ever gets charged with a misdemeanor for that, Big C. Your thoughts on the NHL tonight, Big C?
Well, I think it might have been a little bit intimidating to the good folks of Pittsburgh. That's one of those clean when you look at it. But, I like the Predators tonight, Jonathan. In the first game,
yeah,
Penguins got up early.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. Started out on a 5-3 power play,
yeah,
which really put the Predators on their back heel.
Yeah.
But after that, they settled down and they tied the game 3-3, a couple of late bursts, and Pittsburgh pulled away with a 5-3 victory.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, the Predators haven't lost 2 games in succession all playoff season this year.
Wow.
So I look for them to bounce back. They're a resilient team. They're the underdog. So they're out there and they're going to be scrapping. When you come in and you're a 16 seed for the first time in Lord Stanley's Cup, you're playing with house money, Charlton, in every game. You're playing with house money. First time being there, you get a lot of jitters.
Yeah.
And I saw that with Nashville, that they had that first time being there jitters. But now all that's been settled. They have a true leader and Subban on the team.
Yeah.
This is a team that can go out and create its own destiny tonight with a win in Pittsburgh.
Well, Big C, that's very well said. A lot of good things happening in the world of sports, from baseball to hockey. Everybody's always talking football with the OTAs. I just want to keep everybody aware that high school kids are being flown all over the country for these camps so they can give more chances for the college programs to get free recruiting trips, Big C. Doesn't make any sense. Hopefully they can clear that up, Big C. I want to say every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the iHeart Radio Network, the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. We always tell you there's never any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any woman going through that garbage, just call 911. We got to keep our women safe, and no one should have to deal with that on their own. And as we tell you for every program with Big C Sports, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.